Hello and welcome to episode 8 of my podcast, The Wash. So, we're in a very peculiar place right now. How did we arrive here? I'm not really sure that I know anymore. One thing that I do know is that it was a place that, if you now look back, experts had been predicting would come en masse for a while, which makes you question why we were so unprepared for it. But I don't want this to be like a negative complaining episode. There's enough negativity going around right now, so I'd like to avoid that a bit because it just gets a bit tiring and a bit hard just hearing negative shit all the time. First off, right off the bat, I just want to send my condolences to anyone who's suffered as a result of this situation, as a result of this disease. Anyone who's had any loved ones suffer, pass away, which is a horrible thought. I don't really know what to say, but I guess I just hope things improve for those of you who have experienced something like that. The thing is, I feel that I need to talk about this, but at the same time, I don't know what to cover, where to begin, how to talk about it, what to leave out. Like I said, I don't want to moan, I don't want to be negative, but there is the aspect or the fact that we need to be realistic about things, and we also need to consider why things went wrong in the way that they did. All this being said, I'm going to do my best. That might not be particularly great, so just bear with me, if you will. I appreciate that. First off, I may as well start on a personal front. So about 12 days ago or so, I developed a cough, which, is a symptom of COVID-19. Actually, just a little qualification, because I'm not sure that people fully know. And whenever I write about it, I try to be strict about this. I mean, it might not be that important in the long run, but just for sake of talking about things and everyone being on the same page. Coronavirus is the family of viruses to which this virus belongs. This is a coronavirus. The actual virus itself is called SARS-CoV-2. I guess the second SARS. I don't really know much about what that means, but that's the virus itself. And then the disease that happens as a result of contracting. Is that a word? It is a word, but I don't think it's the right word. Being infected with this virus causes people to suffer from COVID-19, which is a disease. I'm not sure if you still suffer from COVID-19 if your symptoms don't exacerbate to a certain point. If you get mild symptoms, are you still suffering from the disease? I guess you are. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sure a doctor will have cleared that up somewhere. So that covered, I personally got a cough about 12 days ago or so, and because my girlfriend works in the hospital, we had to make the decision to self-isolate or quarantine. Quarantine is kind of the right word in this instance, I guess. Self-quarantine. I was really lucky. I can't be sure whether I actually had it or not, because I would say that I'm 90 to 95% sure, because it was just coincidental. But then many smart people say that if something seems like a coincidence, then it probably is. But separate from that, I don't get ill. I haven't been ill for 2 years. I haven't had a cold or anything, the flu, for 2 years at least. So for me to just randomly get a cough when I was sleeping well, I, eat relatively healthy, it just seemed too coincidental. So I had a cough, which hasn't fully gone away, to be honest. I suffered from slight breathing changes, that could be anxiety, but it feels a little bit different than that. Even now, I still have a weird feeling going on with my lungs. I also had a couple of days where I felt bad. I had a headache and some body aches, and my girlfriend also suffered some symptoms, but less obvious than me. My cough was the obvious thing. It was, I guess, wet cough is like a really horrible thing to say. I think there's a chesty cough, I think it's called. But it went from a mucousy cough to a dry cough. Don't know what that means. I mean, we get some information, but the experts themselves don't know all there is to know about this thing. So you can't really, you can't really fully, I mean, when can you ever diagnose yourself with anything? If you Google your symptoms for anything, you get told, it's cancer or it's some kind of disease that's going to kill you. That's the problem. Without testing, what happens is you're trusting the public to self-diagnose. And on one side of that, you've got hypochondriacs who are going to be like, oh, I feel slightly different. I should self-isolate, 14 days off work, please. And then on the other side, you've got people who, oh, I've not missed a day of work in my whole life. And so what they do is, I've got a cough, but it's not that, or I'm not going to spread it. So they go in anyway. That's what happens when you ask individuals of varying intelligence and just varying characteristics in all senses to diagnose themselves. We know that doesn't work, but there's nothing we can do about it because we don't have the relevant testing capacity or whatever to check if the general public have it. Another thing to say on that is obviously we get these numbers every day. We get the number of people, this is all over the world, but in the UK specifically, we get the numbers of people who have passed away from the disease, and we also get the numbers of people who are, have been infected, have been tested, and they've tested positive. Well, that's kind of, these numbers are completely skewed because we don't truly know how many people have it. And as has been said all along, what we do know is that the likelihood is that many more people have this thing than is being accounted for in these numbers produced daily. So when you see that number of tested, like, I guess it's a sample. You've got a sample because they're the people that get tested and, go to hospital. And then I don't know whether it's a useful sample or not. It must be in some way because, people are creating these models based on it. But then you've got the number of deaths. So the reality is that the death rate is probably higher than it would be if we knew truly how many of the general public. Because if I have it, or if I have had it, I don't have it now. If I have had it, then no one knows apart from me. So there's that. As I've said, I'm okay, and I consider myself very, very lucky, especially if I have had it and I'm okay. I consider that to be luckier than not having had it at all. Maybe that's a stupid thing to think, but that's my analysis of it. I'd rather have had it, survived, and be able to move forward, because living in fear of this thing is just horrible. I can't speak too authoritatively on this, but if I have had it, then I think it's important for people to know that not everyone gets this really terribly. Not everyone suffers as bad as ending up in the intensive care unit, as we found out with Boris Johnson, which is really sad. And there are going to be, before people started taking this seriously, the problem was that everyone was like, oh, I'm young, I'm fine, I'll be sweet. Or I'm under 60. That's turned out to be a joke, hasn't it? It's only the elderly that are sort of like especially affected by this. Clearly not the case. But now it's kind of switched to the other end. I feel like everyone expects that if they get it, they're doomed. It is not going to severely affect everyone. That I feel like I can say that, and that is valid. Again, always check smarter people's opinions than I. Always check experts. Never take my advice for granted, but never take my advice as an expert opinion, because it's not at all. The reason that I say this is because the worst thing was the anxiety that accompanied all of these symptoms. So there were moments when I thought, what's going to happen to me overnight? I'd heard I'd heard reports from, or analogical sort of stories from people saying, I woke up on the 7th day with a fever that was nearly 100 degrees or something like this, and that's when it got really bad, and then my lungs fell to bits and all of this. So you're constantly expecting that you're going to get really bad. Every odd feeling that you feel in your chest, you think to yourself, oh no, is my breathing ability being compromised? So yeah, like, most people will be okay. A large number of people will not. but that is still a small percentage of the overall population. The things that you can do are just stay as healthy as possible. Like, that's all you can do. And then other than that, I'm not really sure what advice to give you. Don't drink if you really don't want to get severely affected. Definitely don't smoke. Get enough sleep. Just all the obvious things. Eat well. Don't eat loads of fat. Obesity has now emerged as a comorbidity. We know how to be healthy. Really, it just comes to putting that plan into action, and when has there been a better, more obvious time to enact those healthy behaviours and habits. Obviously, the fact that some people won't be severely affected does not mean that you should disregard the social distancing rules in any way. I'm pretty sure that most people have a first degree connection to someone who is older than 50 or has some kind of underlying health symptom, or just like many of the individuals with no underlying health conditions, you can be a normal person, get this, and be severely affected to the point of dying. It can happen. So keep social distancing. In the weeks leading to the UK's lockdown, my public demeanour, I guess, was heavily critical of the government because they weren't acting fast enough. They really did not move as quick as they should have. If I'm being honest, I had a lot of worries before that. When things started to get really bad in China, you'll see on a couple of my podcasts before this one, I made the odd comment about coronavirus and being worried about it. I made a joke here and there, which was worry showing itself as poor humour or just shit jokes. I was already worried. So it was like I sat there waiting for the government to act for about 5 weeks. It was, honestly, that's probably been for me the worst thing about this whole situation, is that the clarity of information that was coming through Twitter from really smart people was there and saying this is going to be really bad, governments need to act now, and the UK just went hold. It was like Hodor holding the door back in Game of Thrones, and they just waited and they waited, and then they went with that weird herd immunity thing, which was just, I think the model based on that, Imperial College's model based on the herd immunity thing, now has come out and said 500,000 people would have died. And now we're looking at, hopefully, it feels like a horrible thing to say, but under 20,000 deaths. The difference in that. So just think about that for a second. And we were going with herd immunity. Despite my early criticism, I'm changing tack now because I think all of our energy should go into doing our best to fight this thing. I do think that afterwards, and I hope people are taking notes, and I hope people are, recording things and, stacking up details of how this has been dealt with, because there needs to be an inquiry into so many organisations after this happens. Our government, the World Health Organization is another thing. We need to look at, the underfunding of the NHS leading up to this, and the situation with the PPE. That's dire, absolutely dire. But let me stop talking about that now. Well, sorry, one more thing. China's role in this. Eating these crazy animals. I'm not even going to talk about that. I don't have anything to say, what. But China's sort of disinformation program thing that's going on, where they haven't been providing accurate figures. Them and the World Health Organization said that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission until the end of January or something ridiculous like that. That all needs investigating. But for now, it's just about focusing on the problem and how we all work together as a country and as a united world to tackle this problem. The reality is that this could be a 6-month thing. It could be a 12-month thing. It could be an 18-month thing. I think I'm leaning more towards it being an 18-month thing. We don't really know, but that's been the experts' number on how long it will take to develop and supply a vaccine to people. When I say it could be an 18-month thing. I mean, I guess the intense social distancing measures. China are starting to release the chains a bit, but I think from what I know, the way that pandemics or epidemics work is that you get multiple waves where people, you'll have the lockdown, the quarantine, or whatever, and then people will be released, and then there'll be a second wave where more people get infected. And from what I read and heard, actually the second wave is usually the most damaging, and will have the peak number of infections and deaths. Hopefully that's not the case. That might change based on evolving information about the information about the infectiousness of this, the R number as they call it, or R naught, I think. That might go up or down based on our testing results when we have mass testing, whenever that will be. But it seems like we should get used to a different way of lifestyle for at least 18 months. That's what I'm doing mentally, and that's what I'm telling anyone I know, with people around me who will listen to me, to do. Look, loved ones will pass away. It's completely horrible. It's grim. It's not something that I want to think about, just in general, about anyone, especially about my personal loved ones, but then just anyone. Like, I don't want people to die, like, earlier than they might have done anyway. But death is an inevitable reality of life. Like, life is made beautiful by the fact that it's finite. I think the only way that you're gonna come through this and move through this in the best way that you can is to develop a different thought process and feeling around the topic of mortality. We need to think of mortality more often and in depth, and we need to think about the mortality of our loved ones, the mortality of ourselves. We're gonna die. Like, that's gonna happen. There's a real chance that myself and you watching and whoever will lose someone in this. I'm really sorry about that. I wish I could stop that, but I can't, you can't. It seems like no one can at the moment. We can limit it, but we don't really know. And in terms of secondary effects, I know so many people who are suffering from the secondary effects of this. Careers seem doomed. People are losing jobs left, right, and centre. People are having to sign up to this rubbish universal credit situation. I mean, even the people that are being furloughed, they don't know if they're going to have a job when they come out of this, because certain companies won't survive. It's a really uncertain time when many of us, all of us obviously, need to eat. We need to pay bills. Some of us need to pay rent, mortgages. I know there's the mortgage holiday, but that's just the payments postponed, isn't it? If you're not earning money, you're not going to be able to pay them at a later date. So for me, there are two main ways that we should move through this, smart ways that we should move through this. The first is to hold the government accountable. Not just the government, but I guess the general governing bodies of the world, all of the organisations that I've mentioned already. I mean, I feel so sorry for Americans and the situation they're in with their bloody president right now. So we need to hold the governing organisations, the governing bodies accountable. We need to make sure that they do the right thing. We need to call them on everything that they're doing wrong. I've already covered that a bit, so I don't want to talk about that too much more. The second one, and maybe even more important in times of such insecurity, we need to step up and we all need to support each other. There are ways that immediately come to mind that we can support each other, and those are helping people who are struggling for food or struggling for money, helping people who are struggling in any other way, mentally maybe. We especially need to support the most vulnerable persons within our society. These people, but not just these people, also people who are solitary figures by character, will be especially isolated at this time, and we need to support those people in all of the other ways that we can, not the immediately obvious ways, like showing love, like just being appreciative of them and making them feel better about themselves, helping them get through the times where they will just be alone with their mind and their thoughts, which is not always a nice place to be. simple things like sharing entertainment or sharing positive news or, calling someone up who you wouldn't ordinarily call up. I'm personally very lucky that some of my family members have organised and set up a time for us all to video call via the now supremely popular Zoom, which everyone wishes they invested in before this. And as a result of that, one of them set up a camera for my grandma, who I haven't seen in a while, and otherwise I wouldn't see for a very long time. So I got to see her yesterday, which was absolutely lovely. Do that if you can. Set up video calls with all of your loved ones, your friends as well. One question that you can ask yourself, and that I'm asking myself at this time, is how can I become a better person through these difficulties? How can I improve myself both in the way I behave, the way I treat myself, but also the way that I treat others? Or how might I become a better person through this hardship? Looking back, many historical figures are remembered, especially because of how they reacted and how they overcame adversity. Winston Churchill's remembered because of the role that he played in getting the British public through World War II. Seneca is remembered not just because of his genius, but how he dealt with the difficult situation he found himself in when he was asked to kill himself for unfair reasons. We are all more than capable of surviving and growing from this. There is going to be pain, but this too shall pass. So there's a particular book, but there are many books, of course, that I think can be really useful in this time. And that book is Tribe by Sebastian Junger, who's a war journalist. And he talks about the solidarity that often comes with these really hard situations when everyone bands together to help each other in a community. And Sebastian Junger ends the introduction of Tribe with the following: humans don't mind hardship. In fact, they thrive on it. What they mind is not feeling necessary. Modern society has perfected the art of making people not feel necessary. It's time for that to end. You are necessary now more than ever. You're not just one human being. You're a node in a gigantic, far-reaching network that spans the whole planet. Stand up and take responsibility for the care of others. Life is fucking beautiful, man. Like, humankind is capable of miraculous things. We're going to see that now with what seems like the entirety of the planet all focused on the one thing that we need to achieve: getting this vaccination sorted, getting through this. If we all maintain a solidarity and we don't split into factions and we don't start blaming each other and spreading fake information and creating bloody stupid conspiracy theories about 5G fucking towers and chips in vaccinations and that. So the anger is just slowly seeping out without me meaning it to. If we stick together and stay sensible, then this could be the start of something better than where we have been in the past. Once we get through all of the pain this is going to cause, we can create something really special. We can change the way that we think about all these things that we seem to be doing wrong. Our relationship with wildlife, the natural environment, our relationships with money, our relationships just with each other. Like, we could treat each other so much better than we currently do. Now is the time to do something more important and significant than you might ever get the chance to do. Go help people. I know that's what I'm going to start doing now. This is it. This is the time. Let's get going. Now, before I switch tracks to something more personal, I just want to make a few comments. The sun has slowly gone down as I've been filming this, so the lighting's probably changed. Who gives a fuck, man? Who really cares? That's one thing, so the lighting's probably changed, but I think it's just about alright looking at my monitor. The other thing is this cut on my nose. I didn't get into a fight. Well, I did. I got into a fight with a tree, I think. I think that's what happened. You know when something bad simultaneously happens as you getting hurt, and you therefore don't actually realise that you got hurt? You hear this about like footballers breaking bones and carrying on playing because they're so invested in what's going on. Well, one of my tools broke, and I think I got hurt at the same time, and I just didn't clock it till later on when I thought I had mud on my nose. That's that on my nose. Moving to the personal, separate from the drama that's going on outside and in all our lives. So I started to take some time in the lead up to all this kicking off to develop a website. As you will all know, I make these podcasts and I also do quite a bit of writing. And I just thought there was more credibility to be had by having my writing on my own personal website rather than just hosting it on social media. Obviously, a website naturally is more customizable than social media. And the other problem with social media is that it leans towards the new. So you're only ever going to see the post that I wrote in the past, 2 days. You never, some people might, some super fans, obviously I have super fans, might scroll down, but all of these posts are backlogged, and some of my better ones are my older ones. People are never going to see them if I just leave it on Instagram and Facebook, for example. So I made myself a website. This last bit of the podcast is just like a quick vocal intro to my website and what is contained within. On my website, you will find my writing, all of my writing. Still need to add a few more articles after this has been put up, and I'll be adding more as I write them each week because I haven't written in a while. I need to get back to writing. You'll find this podcast. I'll host it on my website and I'll direct people to my website. But of course, it's on Spotify as well. It's also on YouTube. I'm not going to post it directly to Instagram anymore because IGTV is just trash. Like, it's just rubbish. The other things included on my website are I've got a page dedicated to the books that I've read and enjoyed, because I've seen people have pages before where they have book recommendations and book notes. At the moment, this page is just my book recommendations with short summaries of why I read them, what I thought of them. Eventually, I want them to all have accompanying book notes, so you can see my favourite bits from the books. And second to lastly, I've got a film review section. I'm still in the process of writing these film reviews, but all the films up there, again, it's like a recommendation thing. I'm not going to be putting films up there that I'm going to criticise because I don't have time for that. The last page will be, I've titled it links, but what it is it's things like articles, videos, podcasts, and other miscellany that I have consumed on the internet, or maybe just in real life, that I've really enjoyed and I think that you'll benefit from also consuming. There's a long way to go on it, and I'm really enjoying doing it, but I am right at the beginning. The website itself will be found at, it's really getting dark now, the website itself is to be found at jackandthewash.com. jackandthewash.com. Same name as my podcast, I think. Or is it just called The Wash? God, that's a joke, man. I think my podcast is just called The Wash. So yeah, it's jackandthewash.com. Incidentally, that's also my Twitter handle, at jackandthewash. And maybe I might change my Instagram username to that as well. We'll see. All irrelevant. You don't need to know that right now. Obviously, I've taken a break recently in production. So now, the reason I did that is because I needed to take some time. Like, this has hit me mentally and emotionally just as hard as everyone else. Obviously, there are some people who have suffered physically. I'm not pretending to be in the situation they are because I just can't even imagine it. But I've had to take some time to think about how I'm going to move through this and how I'm going to react to this. I'm going to write something in the next few days about how we find the balance between using this as an opportunity to change our lives positively, but then also, that has to be contrasted with the fact that it is okay to have some days where you're like, what the fuck is going on? Because this is mental and it's really hard. Now I've got my plan though. I'm hoping to become more prolific than ever with my writing, with my podcast, with the books and the videos, the films, and sharing links as well. I want to produce, all hopefully quality over quantity, but still It's time for me to get going. And the website feels like a solid foundation from which I can move off. Okay then, I'm going to tie this episode up here. I'm sending love to anyone watching this because I know everyone bloody needs it right now. I hope you're all doing as well as you possibly can be. Stay healthy, take care of your loved ones, take care of anyone that you can. Try to not look so much for the pain, the death, and the darkness in these times. Look for the kindness, look for the love. It might not feel that way, but I promise you that it is more present, more visible than ever right now. Thanks for watching and take care. I'll see you next time.